Here's the thing. As a working photographer and filmmaker, I love big cameras. Like, the bigger the better. Full frame, 1.2 aperture, giant lenses. But the truth is, those big, heavy, expensive cameras look less and less like the future of filmmaking, and the future looks a lot more like an iPhone. So in this video, I'm gonna break down a bunch of the things that an iPhone does better than a full frame mirrorless camera. And then at the end, some of the reasons that I'm not gonna sell my big cameras quite yet. Let's start with just image quality. And I'm using an iPhone 14 Pro right now, but I think a lot of this applies to at least a few years back worth of iPhones. So if we take a look at some of the earlier films shot on digital cameras like Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, or 28 Days Later, these were Hollywood movies and they looked great at the time and were shot digital. And honestly, an iPhone right now kind of looks better. Apple, for some obvious reasons, does an amazing job of showcasing this when they shoot their short films shot on iPhone, and creators around the world are doing it too. MKBHD runs his whole car channel shot entirely on iPhone, and it looks great. The color reproduction, the detail and dynamic range, but these are all the things I'm gonna go through throughout the video, but often you can see iPhone footage that blends seamlessly into a proper commercial and you won't even notice. And when you see those big shot on iPhone billboards, even up close, they look okay. Normal people don't really notice the difference. So let's go back 4 years ago to when the iPhone XS came out, and I made a video about how it sometimes seems to have more dynamic range than my full frame 5D Mark IV did at the time. Everybody got worked up in the comments saying this isn't real dynamic range, and obviously the sensor on the 5D is better, and I mean, that's completely true, but you can't argue with the results that you just perceive more dynamic range, meaning more visible detail in the brightest and darkest parts of an image in an iPhone photo rather than a $5,000 full frame camera. And the comments were right, that most cameras take in way more data on those larger sensors. You just can't compete with physics like that. But when you go into image editing software like Lightroom and drag the highlights or shadow sliders, they don't have the same results as what an iPhone is doing out of the box, because Lightroom doesn't understand what is the subject of the photo, where is the face, where is the sky. They've started adding some new automated masking tools, but those take a lot of time to render, and I don't think are even as accurate as what the iPhone's doing on the fly. Bigger sensors will always produce better images, but talk to any professional and they're gonna know that feeling where you take the photo on your big camera and your phone, and for some reason the phone comes out looking better. This is one of my favorite new gimbals. This is the Ronin RS3 Mini, and it is crazy compact, and I'm amazed that they can make such a good gimbal in this size. But you know what it's still a lot bigger than? My iPhone without a gimbal. These both create fantastic results, and the gimbal is gonna be smoother, and if you need perfect footage, you probably still wanna use one with your phone. But I find most of the time, you just don't need it on an iPhone. If you look at a lot of the reels we post to Instagram, they are super smooth and they are not using a gimbal. And in-camera stabilization has gotten a lot better on mirrorless cameras too. This is the Lumix S5 II. It has the best stabilization I've tested in anything, and it's still not as good as an iPhone. And in moving scenarios, it still can't keep up with an iPhone. The sensor is way bigger and it's a lot to move that around and keep it stable. The iPhone 14 introduced action mode, which is completely insane. Like when you're running and shaking all over the place, it still somehow locks onto the subject and keeps it stable. I don't know how it does such a good job, but it works. But keep in mind that crops in a lot on the image, so a 4K file becomes 2.8K. And also notice by default, when you switch to action mode, you're going to the ultra wide lens, so that's also degrading your image quality and you can't shoot in as low of light. Most of the time you don't need action mode because the built-in stabilization is so good, but for those insane circumstances that you usually use a GoPro, now the iPhone can do it too. There's more surprising reasons that an iPhone punches above its weight, but first, how about this case? This is the brand new clear case from our sponsor today, Casetify. It's an upgrade for their Ultra Impact or Impact case in terms of clarity and durability. It has the perfect minimalist look with its clear dotted bumpers, and I put this thing through way more of a test than I usually test my cases. To make sure this ultra thin minimal design could hold up to my daily use, I've been using it for 2 straight weeks now. Unfortunately, dropping it more than I'd like, but it held up totally fine. It's drop tested for up to 6.5 feet, so it easily handled my daily abuse. Casetify has added UV Defender technology so that yellowing that can sometimes happen to clear plastics is not gonna happen as I use this case over time. And then they thought of a test that is is kind of crazy. I wouldn't have done this test myself, but Casetify suggested, what if you put it in coffee or wine and see what happens? So of course, that's what I did. I picked up an OtterBox as well to compare side by side, and I put them both in coffee and wine for 12 hours. And afterwards, this is what the Casetify case looked like. Pretty much normal. And here's the OtterBox. These are the two that were in wine overnight. You can see there is a yellow tinge to the OtterBox. Definitely did not hold up as well. But the coffee was way more crazy. The OtterBox is gross yellow. This looks like it's a 10-year-old case that's been sitting on a dashboard. Meanwhile, Casetify just looks clear, like it's almost like new. The only spots are in the buttons. It did hold on to a bit of the yellow there, so I'd recommend you don't submerge your phone in coffee for 12 hours. But this is an impressive result and definitely gives me more trust that the Casetify is gonna hold up a lot longer without looking gross. So go try their clear case yourself, just not the same test that I did. Head to the link below and you're gonna get 15% off and enjoy all the benefits of a clear case without the downsides. Something that's so built into an iPhone that we may not think about it is just the file system and the fact that as you shoot, it's saved to the camera, which is also the computer that you're gonna be editing on. So it doesn't mean you ever have to download cards, there's no real file management, and some of the best video editing apps are on the iPhone. Every year I do videos all about the apps that I'm using on my iPhone, and I recently did a few just about filmmaking, so if you wanna watch those, you can see exactly how I edit for my phone, but it really is a huge advantage not needing an SD card and to go through the rigmarole of downloading to a bigger computer. If you use iCloud, you also get the benefit of automatic backups all the time, so I find it way easier to find old photos or videos from my iPhone than what I've shot on my cameras. Like, phone photos just get resurfaced in my life more and I lose track of them less. I have a lot of hard drives with just buried 50 megapixel raw photos. I want to show you a few lenses that I really love. So this is the 10-25 1.7 from Panasonic. So on a full frame, this would be 20 to 50 millimeter, 1.7. This is the Sigma 24-30 2.0, which is usually what I shoot this A-roll on. It's like my main YouTube camera. And it also has the RF adapter on it. Now I could say a lot about how great these lenses are, but I just want you to notice the size, not to mention the cost. Now let's take another look at the iPhone and remind ourselves what we have here. So this goes from 13 millimeter all the way up to 77 millimeter. That's way more zoom range than either of these. The aperture is different on each of the lenses. On the main one, it's 1.8, which is excellent for a full frame camera. But it's just that as a photographer that's been around since the film days, having this much range is actually amazing and we kind of take it for granted. And all of them are pretty good. We still want to see the ultra wide and the telephoto get a little bit better, but they create excellent image quality. And for a lot of people, this will be the widest lens they ever use and the first time they probably have access to a macro. Like, I kind of think the ultra wide was the biggest upgrade we've ever had to an iPhone, but you guys tell me in the comments, what's better, ultra wide or telephoto? Pick one. I think that the microphones in the iPhone are actually really underrated. So I'm gonna record this segment using the Voice Memos app on my iPhone, and we can compare it directly to my Deity S-Mic 2S, which I love this mic. It sounds very professional and it's expensive, like as expensive as an old iPhone. But they both sound excellent. And it's part of what I love is that the quality you get out of the mic of an iPhone is kind of close to a professional microphone. The biggest difference is the distance away. So as it gets further away, you're gonna hear the echo of the room more, just like with any mic. I'd say though, it's harder to get professional quality audio into your iPhone. Probably the best solution for it lately is the DJI Mic's wireless mic setup. You can plug it directly into the lightning port, monitor it with headphones, and then you've got professional quality audio and it's consistent whatever distance the phone is away from you. So just to show this off, usually audio is good when you're near your camera, but as you back up, it gets much worse. Right now, I'm way over here, but I sounded the same as when I was over there, and that's thanks to the DJI mic. I just love how easily it connects to the interface, and it sounds great. But let's not get carried away. I'm still filming this video on a bigger camera. Why would I do that? What are the advantages? There's a list. I've written them down. A big one, these large cameras are still way better for image quality, especially as soon as you're viewing the image large. So if you only look at images on social media, you often can't spot the difference between an iPhone and a way more expensive mirrorless camera. But as soon as you blow it up, even to full screen in a desktop background, you can clearly see the difference. And I also think iPhone really needs to turn down the sharpening, like the over-processed look just is too powerful, especially with this 48 megapixel sensor. I think we could be getting much better results. For example, when I shoot a RAW photo, both on the iPhone 14 Pro and compare it to the Canon R5, they look very similar when they are RAW. But if you just shoot to JPEG, the iPhone still looks super sharpened. I don't have enough storage in here to shoot RAW all the time, so I hope Apple gives us better results straight out of camera when we're shooting compressed files. This one mostly applies to shooting video. I think there's some real problems with app support, both in the native app and how third-party apps are able to record video on the iPhone. When we're doing professional work with our iPhones, a huge problem is the stability of exposure and white balance. It just shifts and jumps around as you're pointing the camera in different directions and just going through a normal shot. You can't really lock in exposure or white balance without also locking focus. And all those things would be completely basic on a bigger camera. They'd be expected. So now, of course, you could use a third-party app, things like Filmic Pro. The problem is the support for the camera and that software is not great. So when I use image stabilization, there's a visible delay in Filmic Pro and any other third-party app. And there's something about dynamic range, like when I tap on the screen to get the most out of the highlights and shadows, it doesn't have the best maximum latitude that you could get with the native camera app. If this is confusing, I did a whole video about how to use the native camera app and get the most out of it, but there's definitely some things that Apple needs to improve. Another one is color. If you shoot RAW on the iPhone, you can kind of do anything with it, but for most photos and especially videos, you can't adjust it nearly as much as if you're shooting on log on a proper video camera. Oh, and I always turn off HDR on the phone. That's a tip I give in all of my iPhone videos. And depth of field. Cinematic mode is good, like very good, especially when I compared it to the Google Pixel 7. It just totally blew it away. It has pretty realistic lens blur, but unfortunately the cutout around people, still not as good as a bigger camera. Lens flares, especially at night, that has been an issue haunting iPhones for a long time now. Overheating, anytime you're shooting outside in the sun, the iPhone will get so hot that it'll just turn the screen almost black and you can't really see what you're doing anymore. So for people shooting professional work on the iPhone, like we do more and more these days, there still need to be some big improvements. But okay, a few last reasons to choose this. Let's remind ourselves of the size difference. And this one detail goes a long way. I actually end up being way more creative with what we're doing with our iPhone than when I'm using a bigger camera. I feel more restricted when I need to hold on to something large that's gonna shake more. With this, I can get into any tight space and shoot in ways I would never have imagined using conventional cameras. There's never been a better time to get into photography or filmmaking because all the gear makes it so incredibly easy to do professional work. If you want to learn how to do that, I've got a ton of videos about it, so I hope you subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.